All right, this is the second part of Julie Otens' question. Julie says, I recently had a signed lease option agreement seller back out of a deal before I could find a buyer because the husband feared of not being able to cover 2 mortgages should the tenant buyer move out and not buy their house. Since I couldn't quickly find them a buyer the first time, this led them to ask what would happen if the tenant buyer backed out, leaving them 2 houses to pay for. I guess I didn't have a good enough answer for them. Well, if the tenant doesn't make his payments, you have to evict that tenant, not you, but them, and you're going to recommend a good attorney for them to do that for them. And during that time, they're going to have to continue to make the payments on their property. So there is that. It is a problem, and it's not something that anybody wants to happen, and it does happen sometimes, and they would have to deal with it if that situation arose. But let's look at their options, because it always comes back to, I don't want to do this, but what are your other options? Do you have better options than that? If you have a lot of equity in that property, then maybe a better option for you would be to hire a real estate agent and pay that real estate agent 10% of your, 10% of the property value, taking a chunk out of your equity and doing it that way. Now, I think that 10% that you're paying the realtor is a lot more than you'll ever lose in vacancies, but let's say you want to do it that way and not have to worry about that headache. That's okay. If it's just the headache you're worried about, then it's a matter of getting a property manager. If it's a problem with making the payment, then if you can't sell this property at all, does it make sense just to stay in that property? Should you just stay in that property? And is it possible for you to stay in that property? Otherwise you're going to have to sell it. And if you have to sell it and you don't have enough equity, then you're going to have to come to closing with money to pay your realtor, or you have to pay out of your equity to pay your realtor to do that. So there's always the possibility this could happen. Now you could give them the other option. You could say, well, why don't you just deed the property to me? I'll promise to make the payments for you, and I'll worry about whether the tenant makes the payments. And that's taking the property subject to and keeping it for the long term and building your portfolio and making a great profit that way. And then you get the lease option fee, which you could put into a reserve. And if you have a vacancy, you can use the lease option fee to cover that vacancy time. And after you get a few of those, you don't have to keep every one of your lease option fees. You just have to keep enough to keep, a 10% vacancy rate going at any particular time. So if you have 10 of those and you made, let's say, $5,000 per property, you made $50,000 on 10 properties that you bought in a year, and at any particular time you've got one of those that's vacant, then if all you need really is to keep $5,000 or $10,000 in an escrow account for your reserve, so that you can make sure you can make your payments every month, and then you're not going to have that problem. So when you're talking to sellers, it's about their options. If you're looking for the options and to understand what their options are, go to the lead sheet in the auto marketer, and in the lead sheet there's a little button that says seller options, and you click on that and it'll explain, piece by piece what all the seller options are. Sell with a realtor, sell it dramatically under market value, sell it on terms, sell it on a lease option, sell it on a subject to, sell it on a land contract. All those things and more are defined in those seller options, and it's really worth reading through that process so you'll understand how it works. All right, that's question 2 for Julie. I'm going to actually do a couple more videos for you just so that I can make sure I cover all your questions this time. All right, thanks. Talk to you next time.